My name is Rowan Wells. For 28 years, that name has been my own. It has been signed on art school applications, whispered in quiet moments with the man I love, and printed neatly on the little cards that accompany my botanical illustrations at the local artists' co-op. I've always thought of it as a name that suited me, quiet, a little bit lost in thought, connected to the earth. I live in Portland, Oregon, a city that seems to breathe with the same gentle, rain-soaked rhythm as my own heart. My world is one of soft light filtering through the Douglas firs in our backyard, the smell of damp soil and brewing coffee, and the steady, comforting presence of my fiancé, Finn. Finn is a landscape photographer, a man who finds his truth in the silent language of light and shadow. His patience is a force of nature, as vast and unassuming as the coastlines he loves to capture. He is the anchor to my often drifting boat, the calm hand that stills my own when it trembles. We have built a life together that feels like a sanctuary, a small, warm cottage filled with books, plants, and a shared understanding that the most beautiful things are often the quietest. This life, this carefully cultivated peace, is why the annual pilgrimage to my parents' house for Christmas always feels like a dissonant chord played in the middle of a lullaby. Their home in the manicured hills of Lake Oswego is a world away from our cozy life. It is a house of polished surfaces and unspoken rules, where emotions are kept neatly in their place, like the pristine silver on the dining room table. Every year, I walk through their door and feel a subtle shift within myself, a bracing for an impact that never comes, leaving only the lingering ache of anticipation. This year I brought Finn, hoping his quiet strength would be a buffer, a shield against the familiar chill. I should have known he would see more than I ever allowed myself to. The evening began as it always did. My mother, Victoria, greeted us at the door with a smile that was perfectly bright and entirely surface level. My father, Stephen, offered a firm, brief handshake to Finn, his eyes already drifting towards the television in the den. My sister, Isabel, was there, of course, draped over an armchair with a glass of Pinot Noir, looking effortlessly chic in a minimalist cashmere sweater that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. Her new boyfriend, a man whose name I'd already forgotten, nodded earnestly at everything she said. Dinner was a masterclass in polite evasion. The conversation skimmed across safe, shallow topics: Isabel's recent promotion at the marketing firm, Finn's new camera lens, the unseasonably mild weather. No one asked about my art, my life, my heart. It was a familiar omission. I used to burn with the injustice of it, the feeling of being a ghost at my own family's table. Now I simply observe it, a scientist noting the predictable behavior of a distant, cold star. I timed it this year. 12 minutes passed before the conversation flowed entirely around me, as if I were a rock in the middle of a stream. After the dessert plates were cleared, Victoria clapped her hands together with a practiced, theatrical delight. "I found the old photo albums while I was cleaning out the hall closet," she announced, as if this were a spontaneous holiday miracle and not a meticulously planned annual ritual. We all arranged ourselves in the living room, the scent of pine and cinnamon hanging heavy in the air. Isabel leaned forward with a look of feigned interest she had perfected over years of practice. Her boyfriend mirrored her pose. I sat on the love seat, Finn's thigh a warm, solid presence next to mine. I found myself watching his face more than the glossy pages Victoria turned. The first album was a sea of familiar images: birthday parties with store-bought cakes, awkward school pictures from the 90s, a trip to the coast where the wind had plastered my hair across my face. The second album was dedicated to Isabel. Baby Isabel in the bath, a toddler Isabel opening Christmas presents, a glowing Victoria holding her, a proud Stephen looking on. Every milestone was documented, every smile captured. Then came the third album. My album. And that's when I felt the change in Finn. It wasn't a sudden movement. It was a stillness. The kind of absolute focus he gets when he's waiting for the last light of dusk to hit a mountain peak just right. His shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. He squinted at a photograph of me, aged about 6, standing in a garden. Then he looked at the next page, a photo of me on a swing set. His head tilted, a gesture I knew so well. It was the look he got when he was studying a print in his darkroom, searching for a flaw in the composition, an inconsistency in the grain. He was seeing something I wasn't. Quietly, beneath the table, his hand found mine, his fingers wrapping around my own. The warmth was gone, his skin was cool, his grip tight. "Rowan," he whispered, his voice so low it was barely a breath against my ear. "Don't you see it?" I looked from his intense, focused face back to the photo album. It was just me. A little girl with dark, serious eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. "See what?" I whispered back, confused. He squeezed my hand once hard. "How can you not see it?" He dropped my hand then and leaned back, his expression smoothing over into one of polite interest as Victoria launched into an anecdote about how I'd once tried to build a fort out of sofa cushions. I sat there, my heart suddenly beating a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. The room felt too warm, the air too thick to breathe. I tried to smile, to nod along with my mother's story, but my face felt stiff, a poorly fitting mask. When I leaned in to ask him again, he gave a tiny, almost invisible shake of his head. "Later," he murmured, his eyes fixed on the album. "Just play along for now. Just play along." The unofficial motto of my childhood. We managed another 20 minutes before Finn invented an early morning photo shoot he'd forgotten about. Victoria fussed, pressing a container of leftover salmon into my hands. Stephen offered another non-committal handshake. Isabel was scrolling through her phone, already worlds away. I moved through the motions of departure, kissing their cool cheeks, my mind a storm of questions. The moment the car door closed, the silence was deafening. The sterile perfection of Lake Oswego's streetlights slid past the window. Finn drove for a few blocks before pulling over to the side of a quiet, tree-lined road. He turned off the engine, plunging us into darkness broken only by the dim glow of the dashboard. "Give me your phone," he said, his voice calm but firm. I handed it to him, my own hands trembling slightly. He navigated to his photo gallery and handed it back to me. "I took these when your mom was getting more drinks," he explained. On the screen was a picture of a picture, the photo of me in the garden, wearing a little blue dress. I'd seen it 100 times. It was a fixture in my memory, as familiar and unquestioned as the sky. "It's just a photo, Finn. Look at the next one." He swiped. It was the photo of me on the swing set. "Now look at this one." Another swipe. Me standing in front of our old brick fireplace. "They're just pictures from when I was a kid," I said, my voice thin. "No, Rowan. Look closer. Look at your face." His voice was gentle, but insistent. "Look at the light. The shadows." I stared, cycling through the 3 images. The garden. The swing set. The fireplace. The backgrounds were different, the clothes were different, but my expression. It was identical. Not similar. Identical. The slight tilt of my head, the half-formed smile, the way a single strand of hair fell across my forehead. It was the exact same face, the exact same moment, cut out and pasted onto different scenes. The shadow on my left cheek was the same in all 3 photos, even though the light source in each setting should have been completely different. They reused my face," I said. The words felt foreign in my mouth, nonsensical. Finn nodded slowly, his eyes full of a sorrow that terrified me. "It's a composite. A fairly good one, for the time. But the lighting is impossible. The edges are just a little too soft." He took the phone and swiped again. A new image appeared. It was a baby picture from the album. A chubby infant with wispy blonde hair and pale blue eyes, wrapped in a lace-trimmed blanket. "That's not you," he said softly. "Look at the bone structure. The complexion. Your eyes are dark, Rowan. They always have been." I stared at the strange baby, a hollow feeling opening up in my chest. I had always felt a disconnect from my baby photos, a sense of looking at a stranger. I dismissed it as the simple strangeness of time. He swiped one last time. It was the quintessential family portrait. Stephen, Victoria, and a small me, standing in front of our first house. I looked at myself, really looked, for the first time. My outline was fuzzy, unnaturally so. The shadow I cast on the ground was at a completely different angle from my parents' shadows. I looked like a sticker, hastily applied and not quite pressed down. I let out a sound that was supposed to be a laugh, but came out as a choked, desperate gasp. "So I'm a collage," I managed to say. "My whole childhood is a scrapbook project." Finn didn't laugh. He reached over and took my hand, his own now warm and steady. "Why would they do this, Rowan?" he asked, his voice full of the question that was now screaming in my own mind. I had no answer. But in that silent, dark car, surrounded by the quiet, orderly homes of the life I thought was mine, I felt the first hairline crack appear in the foundation of my world. I didn't know it yet, but that crack would soon shatter everything. 5 hours later, my hands shaking, I would call the police. Denial is not a fortress wall that crumbles all at once. It's more like a slow, insidious leak in an old house. You get used to the drip, the faint smell of mold, the damp spot on the ceiling you pretend not to see. You learn to live with the quiet, persistent knowledge that something is fundamentally wrong. I spent that night sitting in the wingback chair in our living room, the city lights of Portland a soft, distant glow through the window. Finn had eventually fallen into an exhausted sleep in our bed, but I couldn't rest. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing that repeating, pasted-on smile, that ghost child in a family portrait. The phone lay on the ottoman in front of me, displaying the gallery of fraudulent memories. I kept looking at them, as if my gaze alone could will them into being real, could fix the impossible shadows and stitch the fuzzy edges of my own image back into the fabric of reality. It was in that long, silent vigil that the truth began to seep in. Not as a single, dramatic revelation, but as a series of quiet, devastating connections. A whisper I could no longer ignore. I have no memories before the age of 5. Not one. My conscious life begins in a brightly lit, sterile hallway. I can still feel the cold, smooth tile beneath my small shoes, smell the antiseptic scent of a government building. My parents, the people who called themselves my parents, had always explained this blank space with a single, solemn phrase: the war. We were refugees from Bosnia. They said I was traumatized, that the brain has a way of protecting itself by building a wall around the things it can't bear to remember. They said they were lucky to have gotten me out. They said a lot of things. And I believed them. What choice did I have? The alternative was unthinkable. You don't tell your first-grade teacher that you suspect you skipped the toddler years entirely. My first memory is not of a mother's hug or a father's laugh. It's of Victoria's hand gripping my shoulder, her voice a low, urgent hiss in a language I was just beginning to forget, Nazma Gzi's smile. We were in an immigration office, and a woman with a clipboard was looking at me. I understood, even then, that I was a performance. Life after that was normal adjacent. A small apartment in a gray corner of the city, the constant struggle of new immigrants. They worked hard, I'll give them that. They provided a roof, food, clothes. They gave me everything a child needs to survive. But the things a child needs to thrive, warmth, spontaneous affection, the feeling of being truly seen, those were absent. The love in our house was a practical, brittle thing. It had sharp edges. 2 years later, Isabel was born and the entire climate of our home changed. Suddenly, the house was filled with a soft, vibrant light I'd never known. There were camcorders and baby books with embossed letters. There were birthday parties with pony rides and themed decorations. There were long, easy hugs and bedtime stories. For Isabel, there was a universe of tender, unconditional love. For me, there had only ever been the quiet expectation of self-sufficiency. Rowan is so strong, Victoria would tell friends. So independent. She never needed much. It was only now, in the pre-dawn stillness of my living room, that I understood this wasn't a compliment. It was an excuse. Our family was an island. There were no grandparents, no aunts, no uncles, no cousins who ever came to visit from the old country. When I asked, the answer was always the same vague, tragic story. The war had scattered everyone. They had lost touch. They had no one left. It was a story I accepted because the void it created was the only reality I knew. But there were other cracks, other drips I had ignored. When I was 16, I walked into the kitchen to find Victoria staring intently at the family computer. On the screen was a Facebook message written in Bosnian. The sender was a woman I didn't recognize. Her message was long and peppered with heart emojis. I saw Victoria's face go pale, her expression turning to stone. With a few swift, deliberate clicks, she deleted the message, blocked the sender, and closed the laptop. "Who is that?" I had asked. "Spam," she'd said, turning away to wipe down an already clean counter. "Just spam." But spam doesn't make your hands shake. Spam doesn't make you look like you've seen a ghost. I let it go. I always let it go. A year later, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety and PTSD. I was plagued by nightmares I could never remember upon waking, a constant, low-humming dread, a feeling of waiting for a blow to fall. My therapist, a kind woman with gentle eyes, traced it all back to the war I couldn't remember. We talked about inherited trauma, about the psychological scars of displacement. It all made a sad kind of sense. But I know now I wasn't afraid of a war. I was afraid of a memory of her. It didn't return all at once. It came in sensory flashes, like lightning illuminating a dark landscape for a split second. The scent of chamomile tea and wood smoke. A woman's hands, softer and warmer than Victoria's, braiding my hair. A lullaby sung in a low, sweet voice. This woman was not my mother. Not the woman who raised me. She was someone else. And I was in a small room, with sunlight slanting through a window, and I felt safe. I felt loved. Then another flash. The woman who raised me, a younger Victoria, walks into the room. She is smiling, but it doesn't reach her eyes. The first woman, the one who smells of chamomile, leans down and whispers to me in Bosnian, "Ovo je tata." She is your auntie, just for a little while. A visitor. And another. A sharp, terrifying memory. I am crying, pulling on my coat, my small voice wailing, "Hoka mamu. I want mama." And a hand, Victoria's hand, grips my arm, her nails digging in. Her voice is a blade. "Don't say that name. Never say that name again. If you talk about her, she will disappear forever." The final memory hit me like a physical blow. The screaming. I was in a strange bed, in a strange room, the sheets rough against my skin. My own legs were kicking, my throat raw from shouting for her, for the woman with the soft hands and the sweet lullaby. And another voice, Stephen's voice, cold and final. "Enough. She is gone. This is your home now." The weight of it buckled me. The panic that had been simmering all night boiled over, and I slid from the chair onto the floor. I couldn't breathe. The room spun, the soft lights of the city blurring into streaks. I pressed my palms flat against the cool hardwood floor, trying to anchor myself to something real. Finn found me there, his footsteps soft on the floor. He knelt beside me, his face a mask of concern. He started to reach for me, but I flinched, a raw, instinctual recoil. He understood. Instead of touching me, he just sat there on the floor with me, a silent, steady presence in the chaos of my mind. And somewhere in that storm, a single, clear thought emerged. The truth had to come out. It couldn't stay buried inside me anymore. My hand, still trembling, reached for the phone on the ottoman. I didn't think. I just acted. I found the number for the Portland Police Bureau's non-emergency line. Finn had suggested it earlier, a calmer alternative to 911. My finger hovered over the screen, and then I pressed dial. A calm, professional voice answered. "Portland Police non-emergency. How can I help you?" My breath was still caught in my chest, a knot of pure terror. My mouth opened, but only a dry, rasping sound came out. Finn put a hand on my back, a small, grounding point of pressure. "Hello? Is someone there?" the voice asked. I finally found my own. It was shaky, fragile. I think I need to report a crime." "Okay, ma'am." "What kind of crime?" The words felt impossible, insane. "A kidnapping," I whispered. There was a pause on the other end of the line, the kind of pause that communicates a sudden shift in professional focus. "Ma'am, are you in danger right now?" "No. I don't think so. It happened, a long time ago. When I was a child. I think I'm just remembering it now." Finn reached over and gently took the phone from my hand. His voice was a stark contrast to my own level, clear, factual. "Hello, this is her fiancé. She's processing some significant childhood trauma that has just come to light. We have evidence that her childhood photographs were doctored, and she has no verifiable memories before the age of 5. She has just recovered what she believes is a memory of her abduction. It would have taken place in Bosnia, approximately 23 years ago. He listened for a moment, then gave our names and our address. Yes, we're safe. No, they're not here. No, we haven't confronted them yet. He listened again. I understand. A detective will call us? Thank you. We appreciate it. He ended the call and placed the phone back on the ottoman. He looked at me, still crumpled on the floor, and his expression was one of profound sadness, not for himself, but for me. For the little girl in the doctored photographs. It's out now, he said softly. I nodded, taking a deep, ragged breath. The words had been spoken. The secret was no longer just mine. It was real. And there was no going back. The 2 days that followed were lived in a strange, suspended reality. The world outside our cottage windows continued its normal rhythm. Rain pattered against the glass. Neighbors walked their dogs. The scent of autumn leaves filled the air. But inside, time had warped. I moved through the motions of life, showering, making tea, sketching the delicate veins of a fallen maple leaf, but I felt profoundly disconnected from it all, as if I were watching myself from a great distance. Finn was my shadow, a quiet guardian who seemed to know exactly when to speak and when to simply be present. The promised call came on the second morning. A detective named Grant, his voice weary but kind, asked a series of gentle, probing questions. He explained that a case file had been opened, but that jurisdiction for a decades-old crime that occurred overseas was incredibly complex. He was frank, it would be a slow, difficult process. He advised us not to confront my parents, to let the initial inquiry proceed through official channels first. I agreed, my voice a monotone. The call ended, and the silence that rushed back in was heavier than before. It was real. It had a case number. The knock on our door came that afternoon. 3 sharp, decisive raps that made me jump. Through the peephole, my heart sank. It was Victoria and Stephen. Victoria held a large, potted orchid, its perfect white blossoms looking alien and sterile. Stephen stood a step behind her, his hands jammed in his pockets, his face a neutral, unreadable mask. Finn appeared beside me, his presence a silent question. I took a breath, straightened my shoulders, and opened the door. Rowan, darling, Victoria began, her voice brittle with forced cheerfulness. We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd drop this off. For your lovely home. She thrust the orchid at me. Can we come in? Stephen asked, his tone leaving no room for refusal. I stepped back, and they entered our sanctuary. They looked out of place in our cozy, slightly cluttered living room, like 2 figures from a different, colder world. They sat stiffly on the sofa, while Finn and I took the armchairs opposite them, the coffee table a no-man's land between us. Victoria placed her leather handbag primly in her lap. We had a phone call, she said, her eyes flicking towards Stephen. From a police officer. I just looked at her. I didn't help her. He said you'd filed some sort of report, Stephen said, taking over. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Accusations. They were questions, I corrected him, my own voice surprisingly steady. And I think you know the answers. Victoria's composure finally cracked. A flicker of genuine emotion, fear, maybe, or indignation, crossed her face. You should have come to us, Rowan. We are your family. To go to the police, it's a betrayal. Would you have told me the truth? I asked, the question hanging in the air like dust motes in a sunbeam. She looked down at her hands. The silence was her answer. So it's true, Finn said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. Stephen let out a long, slow sigh, the sound of a man burdened by an inconvenient truth. It's complicated. Try to uncomplicate it, I said. He finally looked at me, really looked at me, and for a second I saw not a father, but a cornered stranger. Yes, he said, the word dropping like a stone into the quiet room. You are not biologically our daughter. I exhaled. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was the strange, hollow feeling of confirming a nightmare. All the inconsistencies, the emotional distance, the doctored photos, they all snapped into a dark, coherent picture. Your mother, Victoria began, her voice taking on a tone of practiced pity. She was just a girl. The war was starting. She had nothing. She couldn't care for you. She begged us to take you, to give you a better life in America. She begged you. I repeated, the word tasting like poison. She wanted the best for you, Victoria insisted, her eyes pleading with me to believe her version of the story. We were approved to leave. She wasn't. It was the only way to save you. A cold fire started to burn in my chest. Where is she now? Victoria and Stephen exchanged a look. We don't know, Stephen said. We lost touch after we came to the States. You never looked for her? You never once tried to see if the woman who begged you to take her child was even still alive. It was too difficult, Victoria said, her voice a weak whisper. We wanted you to feel like you belonged. We wanted to be a real family. Which is why you faked the photographs. Finn interjected, his arms crossed over his chest. To erase her existence completely? You were only 5. Victoria's voice rose, cracking with desperation. You cried for her for months. It was heartbreaking. We thought it was kinder to help you forget. We thought if you had pictures, a history with us, you would adjust. And you did. You forgot all about her. You think I don't hate you for that? I asked, the words raw and quiet. The room fell silent. The perfect white orchid on the table seemed to mock us. Then Stephen leaned forward, his face earnest, his performance masterful. Rowan, listen to me. We didn't steal you. We rescued you. He said it with such conviction that for a terrifying, split second, a part of me, the little girl who had spent her life craving their approval, almost believed him. But then I looked at Finn, at his steady, unwavering gaze, and the moment passed. The lie was just a lie. Tell me her name, I said. They both stared at me. Rowan, what's the point? Victoria began. It will only cause you more pain. Her name. My voice was low, unyielding. Stephen rubbed his face, a gesture of profound weariness, as if my request was the final, exhausting straw. He looked at Victoria, a silent, tense communication passing between them. Finally, he spoke the name, his voice barely audible. Jasmina. Jasmina Sokolovic. He said nothing more. No town, no last known address. Just a name, offered up like a final, insufficient sacrifice. And my name? I pressed. What was my name? Victoria shook her head, a tear finally tracing a path down her perfectly powdered cheek. I don't remember, she lied. They left soon after that, the perfect orchid abandoned on our coffee table. I watched them walk to their car, 2 ordinary people who had stolen a child and called it an act of love. That night, the search began. Finn and I sat side by side at our dining table, laptops glowing in the dark room. He searched immigration records and refugee archives, while I typed a name I'd never heard into a search bar, Jasmina Sokolovic. The internet, it turned out, held more truths than my parents' entire lifetime of lies. The name was not uncommon in Bosnia. There were dozens of profiles, articles, public records. But then I saw it. A Facebook profile. The picture was small and grainy. A woman, perhaps in her early 50s, with dark hair pulled back from a face that made my breath catch in my throat. There was no smile. Just a profound, weary stillness in her dark eyes. Finn, I whispered. He came to stand behind me, looking over my shoulder at the screen. He was silent for a long moment. She looks like you, Rowan, he said softly. I shook my head, a slow, dawning realization washing over me. No, I said. I look like her. It was more than a resemblance. It was my own jawline, the same shape of my eyes, the way my mouth settled into a serious line when I wasn't consciously smiling. It was like looking at a map of my own face, a map that led back to her. Her profile was mostly inactive, but her About section listed a small town in Bosnia. The same town I had once heard Victoria mention in passing, a slip of the tongue when I was a child. With Finn's help, I composed a message. My Bosnian was rusty, a ghost language from a life I couldn't remember, so we used a translation tool, hoping the words would carry the weight of my heart across the ocean. Hello. My name is Rowan Wells. I was given your name, Jasmina Sokolovic. I was born in Bosnia in 1994 and brought to the United States when I was 5. I have reason to believe you may be my mother. My finger hovered over the send button for a long time. It felt like stepping off a cliff. Then I clicked it. We waited. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. The reply came the following evening. A single sentence in Bosnian. Možemo li razgovarati? Can we talk? We arranged a video call. I don't remember the logistics. Finn handled it all. I just remember sitting in front of the laptop, wrapped in a thick blanket as if it could protect me, my heart a wild bird in my chest. Then her face appeared on the screen. She looked older than her photo, tired, but it was undeniably her. It was undeniably me. She didn't speak at first, just stared at me, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears that she didn't try to wipe away. Ida, she breathed. The name echoed in the quiet room. Ida. It didn't feel like a stranger's name. It felt like coming home. I wasn't sure, she said, her voice thick with emotion, switching to halting English. After all this time. I hoped, but I wasn't sure. But now that I see your face, you are my Ida. I wanted to speak, but the words were trapped behind a wall of tears in my own throat. I have looked for you for 23 years, she continued, her gaze never leaving my face. I finally found my voice, a ragged whisper. Did you give me away? Her face crumpled. It was not a dramatic, cinematic breakdown. It was a quiet, devastating collapse of a hope she had guarded for more than 2 decades. No, she said, the word a sob. Oh, God, no, my sweet girl. Never. She took a moment, steadying herself. You were 5. I had to go to the municipal building to finalize our papers to leave for America. I left you with a neighbor, a woman I thought was my friend. She looked at me, her eyes begging me to understand. Just for 2 hours. When I came back, you were gone. She was gone. Her husband said she had taken you to the park. But you never came back. Her voice broke. I went everywhere. The police, the refugee camps. I put up flyers with your picture. Everyone said the same thing. It is the war. Children get lost. But I knew you didn't just get lost. You were taken. My own memory flashed Victoria, the visitor, the auntie, the neighbor, the friend. Finn, who had been sitting just out of frame, spoke gently. Jasmina, did you have papers to come to the U.S.? She nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, we were approved. A program for families with children. I had everything ready. She looked back at me, her expression one of utter desolation. After you were gone, they took me off the list. Single adults were not a priority. Not that I would have left without you. I would never have left without you. And there it was. The final, ugly piece of the puzzle, clicking into place. They didn't take me because they loved me. They didn't take me to rescue me. They took me because I was a ticket. I was their key to a new life, a key they stole from a young mother in the chaos of war. We sat in silence for a long time after that, the thousands of miles between us collapsing under the shared weight of our grief. They told me your name was Rowan, she said softly, as if testing the foreign sound of it. Ida, I said, trying the name on for myself. My name is Ida. It was the first true thing I had known about myself in my entire life. 2 weeks later, Jasmina and I stood side by side in a quiet, sterile room at the Portland Police Bureau headquarters. She had flown in on a tourist visa, using the last of her savings. She clutched a worn, creased piece of paper in her hand, the original missing persons flyer she had printed 23 years ago. The grainy photo showed a small, serious girl with dark eyes and a red scarf. Beneath it, the name, Ida Sokolovic, age 5. We told our story to Detective Grant. Jasmina spoke of her search, her voice trembling but resolute. I spoke of the doctored photos, the blank spaces in my memory, the lies that had formed the bedrock of my existence. When Jasmina unfolded the flyer and placed it on the table, it felt like an artifact from another world, a sacred testament to a love that had never died. This is her, Jasmina told the detective, her finger pointing to my picture on the flyer, then to me. This is my daughter. For the first time in my life, when someone told my story, an official in a position of power listened and nodded. We pressed charges: immigration fraud, falsifying federal documents, kidnapping. The weight of their crimes was laid bare under the flat, fluorescent lights of the justice system. It never went to a dramatic courtroom trial. The evidence was overwhelming. The doctored photos, the original missing persons report from Bosnia, the clear paper trail of their immigration application which listed a dependent child they had acquired only weeks before their departure. Faced with irrefutable proof, Stephen and Victoria's story of a desperate, informal adoption crumbled. Their American citizenship, built on a foundation of deceit, was revoked. They were deported within 6 months, their carefully constructed life dismantled as methodically as they had dismantled mine. They can never return. I felt no triumph, no desire for revenge. Only a quiet, profound sense of release, as if a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had finally been lifted. Isabel, of course, stayed. She was born here. She was an American citizen, an innocent bystander to the crime that had given her her life. In the tumultuous weeks after her parents' arrest, she was silent, withdrawn. Then one evening, she showed up at our door, looking small and lost. We sat in our living room, the space where the lies had been confessed, and she finally spoke. "I am so sorry, Rowan," she said, her voice thick. "For all of it. For what they did. For me not seeing. For everything." It wasn't eloquent, but it was honest. It was a beginning. We are not sisters by blood, but we are sisters by a strange, shared history. We are learning to build something new and real from the rubble of the old. Jasmina, my mother, moved to Portland 6 months later, her path cleared by a family reunification visa. Finn and I helped her with the paperwork, navigated the bureaucracy that had once been used to tear her life apart. She found a small apartment a few blocks from us and got a job at a local Bosnian bakery. The owner, a kind woman who had also fled the war, listened to her story with tears in her eyes and gave her the job on the spot. Jasmina says the smell of baking bread reminds her of her own mother's kitchen. We are learning each other. It is a slow, tentative process, a delicate dance of discovery. We are not erasing the 23 years we lost. We are building a bridge across them. She tells me stories of my grandmother, also named Ida, a woman known for her fierce laugh and gentle hands. I tell her about my love for art, for the quiet perfection of a single fern frond. We walk along the Willamette River, the gray Oregon sky a gentle canopy above us, and we talk. Sometimes, we don't talk at all, and the silence between us is not empty, but full of a peaceful, shared understanding. Finn and I are planning our wedding. It will be a small affair, in a grove of old-growth trees just outside the city. When we gave my mother her invitation, she held the card in both hands and cried, her tears this time not of grief, but of a joy so profound it was almost painful to witness. Her name is on the invitation, right next to Finn's parents, Jasmina Sokolovic, mother of the bride. The people who raised me built their American dream on a stolen child. When their world collapsed, I did not feel pity or guilt. I felt free. I have spent my life feeling like a guest in my own story, a footnote in a narrative that was never truly mine. Now, I am learning to be the author. I am learning that family is not just about the blood you share, but about the truth you are willing to build together. I am learning that self-respect is a quiet, steady flame, and that setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, but an act of profound self-love. My name is Ida. My name is Rowan. I am both. And for the first time, I am whole.